أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا ونطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all of us.
گلا اور خنجر فولاد ہے، سرد پانی تم پیو رو وہ ہماری پیاس پر، ذبح کرنا تشن لب یہ شمر کا ایجاد ہے، لاش قاسم جب ہوئی پامال تو بولی دلہن، یا امیر المؤمنین فریاد ہے فریاد ہے، دیکھ کر اکبر کو آپس میں لعینوں نے کہا، اس جواں کا سر وہ کاٹے جو کہ بے اولاد ہے، عید کا دن ہے گلے ملتے ہیں خنجر سے حسین، ہنچکیوں میں صاف آواز مبارک باد ہے، چل گئی گردن تو آہ گر سے عابد نے کہا، سخت باری ناتوا کو تو جو جلات ہے، تیر مارا حلق اصغر پر تو شہ نے یوں کہا، دل تیرا اے حرملا پتھر ہے یا فولاد ہے، شاہ کہتے تھے نہ بھولے گا کبھی اصغر کدا، اس کو سمجھے گا وہی جو صاحب اولاد ہے، بولے عابد کیا مجھے قائل کرے گا تو یزید، میرا دادا حضرت جبریل کا استاد ہے، ان دنوں میں قید ہے یہ آپ کا ذاکر دبیر، کیجئے اس کی مدد یہ آپ سے فریاد ہے، سینے شبیر ہے اور زانو جلاد ہے، مجرئی سوکھا گلا اور خنجر فولاد ہے، ارواح المؤمنین والمؤمنات ثواب الفاتحہ، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، الحمد للہ رب العالمین الرحمن الرحیم ایاک بسم اللہ.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد حبيب إله العالمين أبا القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى روحك وبدنك الطاهرة صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميعا يا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا يحيى خذ الكتاب بقوة وآتيناه الحكم صبيا. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. As we gather to commemorate and remember the lessons from the life of the 10th Imam of Ahlul Bayt, Abu al-Hasan Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hadi, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, it's important to understand a little bit about the background of our holy Imam. For unfortunately, the latter Imams of the Ahlul Bayt are not given the attention and study and the spotlight that they so truly deserve. Many people are well informed about the life of the Holy Prophet, about the lives of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Al-Hasan wal-Hussein, Lady Zahra salamullahi alayha, as well as the occasional Imam, whether be it Imam al-Sadiq or Imam al-Rida. But quite rarely do we find a mentioning, a gathering that seeks to learn from the bountiful lessons from the life of Imam Ali, son of Imam Muhammad al-Jawad al-Hadi alayhi salam. For indeed, his very namesake is the guide to which we find and learn and know about our Lord. Hadi al-Muhammad, the guide from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. A plethora of wisdom can be learned and lessons that are just waiting to quench the thirst of all those knowledge seekers out there. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam is an example of an Imam that was born in such a turbulent time period and led and took upon the leadership of Imamah at such an extremely young age. He would be the second Imam of Ahlul Bayt to assume the role of leadership globally, Imam, before he reached the age of 10. The first being his father, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam. At that very young age, Imam al-Hadi, born in the 214th year after Hijrah and was martyred in the 254th year after Hijrah at the age of 40 years old. He assumed Imamah upon the death of his father, Imam al-Jawad, while he was around, according to historians and scholars of history, 6 years old, about 6 years of age. When he was about 6 years old, this responsibility of spiritual, political, social, economic guidance was entrusted upon him, yet the Imam was more than competent in assuming that role. For he definitely was foreshadowed by none other than the Holy Prophet of Islam. In our works of theology, we have understood that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt do not simply assume their role, meaning before they took on that role, they were just your standard, ordinary, upright individual. Rather, these were the shining lights from the heavens descended to the earth in the form of the children of Rasulullah. And Rasulullah foreshadowed the coming of these individuals, every single one of them, by their name. And Rasulullah would make mention, after me, the 12 leaders will come and rule. And this tradition is found definitely in the works of other schools of thought, and in our narrative, explicitly mentioning the names, the titles, the responsibilities, the consequences, and the journey of every single one of these shining stars of Ahlul Bayt. All were made clear beforehand by Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Therefore, it's near incumbent upon us to learn a thing or two about our holy Imams, those whom God has chosen upon us to be the hujjaj, the representatives and the proofs of His way. Now we found, as mentioned, born in the 214th year after Hijrah and martyred in that 254th year, giving the Imam the tenure of about 40 years. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, a second example of a young boy assuming that global leadership. And of course, that meant people were not on board immediately, necessarily, to accepting that reality. People had issues considering someone young being their leader, being their boss, being their guide. And this is a phenomenon that transcends time. People today have trouble. Someone younger than me taking charge, telling me what to do, is not something people can easily accept. Similar to this, Amir al-Mu'mineen himself, amongst the reasons why people denied him his rights and furthermore usurped him of his rights of leadership after immediately the death of the Holy Prophet of Islam was literally because of his young age. You're too young, around 30 years old, just too young in our eyes. And so a young man, here we have elders, they found it very difficult. Of course, this was just an excuse, given the reality of Amir al-Mu'mineen being the most competent. But excuses are thrown, and none of them have any merit, nor do they have weight. However, considering that this is the second example, we found an Imam from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, assuming this role at a very young age, the Shia, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, received this as another moment to rejuvenate their vows. So the Shia understood that we've seen this event occur with his father. And it's very clear, considering his behavior and his knowledge at such a young age, able to express all of the wisdom necessary. No matter what is told, what is asked from him, he is able to provide all of these answers and responses and so forth. We had a caliph in that year, roughly about the year 220 after Hijrah, when the Imam was about 6 years old, a caliph by the name of Al-Mu'tasim Al-Abbasi. Understand that there's this person, the son of the previous Imam of the Shias, and he might cause a lot of problems, as the previous members of the household of the Holy Prophet did so towards the establishment, of course, unjust establishments. And so what he decided to do was, considering that the Imam was still of a very little age, young age, maybe this is our time, we can take advantage of his youthfulness and plant our agenda in his mind, perhaps. Brainwash him. He's a young boy, so let's send a tutor. Al-Mu'tasim being in Baghdad and the Imam being in Medina had to send his close confidant by the name of Yahya ibn Hartham. This Yahya arrived in Medina, and he searched for a very qualified tutor that would spend his time with this young Imam Ali al-Hadi alayhi salam and completely brainwash him, such that he will not consider anything relating to revolt, revolution, speaking against the establishment, galvanizing followers, teaching them opposing views and opinions and interpretations from the caliphate and establishment at the time, just to mitigate the threat. He's a young boy, and normally what these tyrannical rulers would do is they would assassinate any threat they had. They would literally get rid of whatever threat. But considering he's just a young little boy, a young kid in their eyes, you cannot do that. Otherwise, the backlash will be ridiculous from the masses. So what was necessary is we sent someone to tutor him. Let him be brainwashed. Let him not think of anything relating to the standard Shia theology. And then we'll be on our way. And that will give us more reason to believe we are in good hands. And he's not going to be a concern for us in the future. So this Yahya ibn Harthama, sent by Al-Mu'tasim al-Abbasi, the Abbasid Caliph, finds a very knowledgeable educator by the name of Ubaydullah al-Junaydi. This Ubaydullah al-Junaydi is informed, we will pay you a good amount. Just go and tutor him. Now this young man doesn't have his father around. Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam had been martyred previous to this. And his martyrdom was done by the hands of his wife. So this young boy simply had his mother around him, Lady Sumana al-Maghrabiya, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayha, the upright and pious lady of her time. And Lady Sumana was very conflicted, rather restricted from being able to have much say in the life of her child. And if you have a king who wants to force and superimpose a tutor, then she has not much say. And so she was limited in what she can do and restricting anyone from affecting her young boy. So this caliph sent this man. This man found this tutor, and the tutor began to teach. Time passed. Ubaydullah Junaydi began teaching the Imam, began informing him, educating him of their narrative, the theology that the Abbasid establishment accepted, the worldview, the history, personalities to respect, personalities to ignore, and all of that. Eventually, Yahya ibn Harthama ran up, followed up, and he ran into this Ubaydullah Junaydi and he questioned, how is this young boy? What's it like so far? How has it been? To which Ubaydullah Junaydi responded with a very condescending tone, don't call him a young boy. He is beyond that. You think that I am teaching him this entire time? By Allah, he's the one who has been educating me. Yahya's confused. He's like, what are you talking about? All this time you have spent with him. What do you mean he's been educating you? The moment I stepped into the home and I began educating him and teaching him from the understanding that I am his tutor, I realize there's nothing I ask him except that he has a response back to me. Whenever I ask him questions about the Holy Quran, he would not just give me the answer. He would tell me where that verse was revealed, in which chapter, on which day it was revealed, and which city it was revealed in. Was it a Mecca or Medinian surah? In addition to that, the tafsir of the verse he would give me. And upon who was it revealed? Was it revealed about this individual or that? He would constantly be able to provide me every bit of information I wanted to know. And I'll tell you this, it's not just Quran, it's the sciences that are out there and that I understand, whether it's grammar, whether it's mathematics. This young boy is able to respond to anything I'm asking to him. And I'll further conclude to you. And I found him to be worthy of following and emulating. And I've decided to recognize his way. And this Ubaydullah Junaydi accepted the worldview of the school of Ahlul Bayt. And this shocked the establishment that not again, another example of a young child claiming to be an imam, and not just that, proving that they are Imams from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam grew up in Medina and would stay and educate the community there. He had with him work that was passed down, pieces of literature that was passed down from previous members of the Ahlul Bayt. He had what would be referred to as Sahifat Ali ibn Abi Talib. Many of us may have heard of Sahif al-Sajjadiyya of Imam Zainul Abidin, a collection of supplications. He had what is referred to as Sahifat Ali ibn Abi Talib. What's this Sahifat Ali ibn Abi Talib? As-Sahifa basically means the workbook, or basically a collection of notes and pieces of information. What this was, when Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam would be in the presence of Rasulullah, and that virtually was 9 times out of 10, the closest to the Holy Prophet of Islam, whenever Rasulullah would teach, whenever Rasulullah would hold his sessions and teach and educate, Amir al-Mu'mineen would sit the closest to the Prophet and begin writing down his lessons. So you're basically talking like a very grand teacher, imagine like a very big and important professor or a big and important scholar, and you have their pupil, number one student, sitting right under and just jotting down all these notes. These collections of paper, manuscripts, they comprise dua, supplications, written by the hand of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi, as well as Islamic legal opinions, so jurisprudence, and well, considering that this is from Rasulullah, it's not opinion, so Islamic legal facts, so fiqh, jurisprudence, dua, and so on and so forth. Imam alayhi salam al-Hadi had this in his possession, and he literally revived that same sunnah. It gives us an example as to the initiative of what the Imams of Ahlul Bayt seek, just the revival of the accurate sunnah. The irony is, eventually we would have a caliph who would be responsible for the martyrdom of Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam by the name of al-Mutawakkil al-Abbasi. Amongst his titles are Muhyi as-Sunnah. And there are many people today, of course, from the other schools of thought, that refer to al-Mutawakkil, Imam killer, as Muhyi as-Sunnah, the reviver of the practices and teachings of Rasulullah. When on one side, in Medina al-Munawwara, you have Ali al-Hadi teaching the Sunnah, and in Baghdad of the Abbasids, you have this al-Mutawakkil destroying the Sunnah. In any case, Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam would spend his early years, because we mentioned he lived to be only 40 years old until he was martyred. Spent those early years educating, teaching from Sahifat Ali ibn Abi Talib. Eventually, people noticed, word got around, that whenever he would gather, people would follow him and flock to him by the tens. And this was very threatening to any establishment. Any authority, you notice, if ever there's a huge gathering, people, the authorities usually do not like that. Why? Because considering I look like I'm outnumbered. So what happened? Al-Mu'tasim later on forced the Imam to quit teaching, to no longer educate. It was a command. So you're not able to teach. That didn't stop the Imam from spreading knowledge, however, because by that time, due to the restrictions that were imposed on the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, the network of the Shia globally was established. What is the network of Shia? Because the latter Imams were imprisoned, home imprisonment, and so on, they found it necessary to establish a system which they would communicate with their followers. The Shia predominantly about 1,200 or so years ago, the hot pockets were in Medina, little bit of them in Medina, in Kufa, in Basra, and in Ahwaz. You had, and in addition to that, Samarra as well. But these were the main large pockets. Medina, Kufa, Ahwaz, Samarra. And of course, you had the bit in like Baghdad and so on. And so they would establish deputies and communicate with them. So the Imam wouldn't teach, but he would speak to a representative who would then convey his message to all those who are interested in learning and want to learn. Eventually, we had Al-Mutawakkil Al-Abbasi forced the Imam Al-Mutawakkil now. So after Al-Mu'tasim died and left, Al-Mutawakkil came to power. Al-Mutawakkil was something many people can only imagine. We get glimpses of dictators, but when we look at Al-Mutawakkil, you think it's as if these dictators and horrible rulers took their lessons from him. Al-Mutawakkil, the irony of this man being called the reviver of the Sunnah, he attempted over 70 times, according to traditions, to drown and destroy, demolish the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So he attempted multiple times. What he would do is he would divert the Euphrates River. He would open a bank, like a channel, and he would make people dig the river towards the shrine of the Imam, such that when heavy rain comes, what would happen in his mind is that the river would just flow over the Imam's shrine, demolish it and destroy the grave, and it would be forgotten in history because there's now a new river on it. Whatever he would do, no matter how many times he tried to do that, however, the water would never go over the shrine. It would only go around it. And so it would be described as water being confused, because typically, physically, water would go over whatever it is charging towards. It would need some force or factor to make it go around something rather than just take its natural course. And in Arabic, confusion is called ha'ir. And so the water entered the state of, one would say, hira or so on. And so that's why there are some members from Karbala today, their surnames are ha'iri, in memory, basically, of how the Euphrates was confused as to why it's not going over the shrine and it's going around it. So it was a confusing moment, a situation like that. In any case, Al-Mutawakkil came into power. This new caliph, this very authoritative individual, and he knows who Imam al-Hadi is. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, by the time he was taken by Al-Mutawakkil this time and sent to live in Samarra, he had taught so much and he had sent so many letters that we have an abundance of traditions and narrations that focus on many areas of jurisprudence today from Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam. So we look at traditions and narrations that deal with miscellaneous issues, but that are very meticulous. We have a plethora of these responses from Imam al-Hadi. For example, what we can and cannot do sujood on. A man once asked Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, am I able to do sujood on glass, for example? Because according to us, we are only able to do sujood on that which is naturally found in the earth. That's organic and that's not wearable, nor is it edible, for example. Could we do sujood on glass in that case? So you had these miscellaneous issues come into place and the Imam would address them. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam produced for us, in addition to just jurisprudential rulings by the hundreds, correct? He would also provide very deep supplications. Look up the ad'iyat or the supplications of Imam Ali al-Hadi. But be warned, they're very, very powerful. If you've ever read Ziyarat al-Jami'a al-Kubra or al-Jami'a al-Kabira, a variant of names, it's a ziyarah that really describes to you the reality of who the Imams of Ahlul Bayt are. Just to read a just a little portion of the ziyarah, an excerpt. Assalamu alayka ya ahl bayt al-nubuwah wa mawda' al-risala wa mukhtalaf al-malaikati wa mahbit al-wahy. Peace be upon you, O holy household of the Prophet. That's very clear. وَمَوْضِعَ الرِّسَالَةِ, and the landing of message and the landing of the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَوْضِعَ الرِّسَالَةِ وَمُخْتَلَفَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, and the leagues of angels, in addition to just the messages of Allah coming down to you, Ahlul Bayt, angels as well. وَمَهْبِطَ الْوَحْيِ, and the location of where revelation would be revealed to. So one would imagine, well, this all makes sense, but there is an issue that many people have. How can the Ahlul Bayt be so directly connected to Allah? Is that even a reality? Here you have an Imam saying, this is how you would address us. Assalamu alaykum ya ahl bayt al-nubuwah, O holy household of the prophethood, wa mawdi' al-risala, and not just that, the location where the message of Allah comes and lands. Ahlul Bayt, wa mukhtalaf al-malaika, and angels in their variety as well. There is your answer. If can the angels approach the Imams of Ahlul Bayt? I mean, if angels can approach every other person, then of course they can approach the Imams. But many people are not satisfied until they get a narration that proves it. Here you go. Ziyarat al-Jami'a al-Kabira of Imam al-Hadi. وَمَحْبِطَ الْوَحْيِ وَمَعْدَنِ الرَّحْمَةِ, and the storage of mercy. Ahlul Bayt, truly the storage of mercy. وَخُزَّانِ الْعِلْمِ وَمُنْتَهَى الْحِلْمِ, and the holders of knowledge and clemency as well. وَأُصُولَ الْكَرَمِ وَقَادَةِ الْأُمَمِ, and the originators of generosity and the leaders of all nations. وَأَوْلِيَاءَ النِّعَمِ وَعَنَاصِرَ الْأَبْرَارِ, and so on. And the ziyarah is a very long ziyarah that describes to us the reality of the Imams. Many scholars like to indicate, before you read the ziyarah, however, of Imam al-Hadi, Jami' al-Kabira, make sure you recite Allahu Akbar 100 times as sort of a form of expression that this will give you a very unique image of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. The source of where the angels land, revelation, message from Allah, storage of mercy and clemency, and so on and so forth. In addition to all of these ad'iyat and supplications and jurisprudence and beautiful words of wisdom from Imam Ali al-Hadi alayhi salam, we find that he has a very inspirational life as well. When we open the pages of history that surround his life, we mentioned al-Mutawakkil finally ordered that Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam is to be taken from Medina, bring him to me closer to Samarra. The ideal of keep your friends close, put your enemies closer. And to the Abbasid, the enemies were the Ahlul Bayt. So he brought them to where their capital would near where their capitals would be. So Baghdad, al-Mutawakkil brought him to Samarra. Near Baghdad, definitely. When he brought him to Samarra, he made him stay in an area called Khan al-Sa'aliq, which would be known for its poverty and typically where people who were problematic, people who were known for robberies and thefts, and people who had issues, crimes, would be known for holding these sort of individuals. And it was a very poverty-stricken area. He really wanted to humiliate the Imam. And so he put him in this location, under house arrest. And every single day, they would barge into the home of the Imam to harass him, because they were always concerned that the Imam is collecting people and supporters to wage war and form a coup against the establishment. This was something they were paranoid about. They had a hysteria that one day this man is going to collect people to wage war against us. We just know that's going to happen. Why they would always behave in this manner would be because they really understand the reality of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. They know they are special. They know they have a capability of inspiring all of those who come near them. And so it was out of concern and fear that what if one day, even if they are under house arrest, they can just inspire people to come and aid them and help them. Even the bodyguards. One time, there was a member from the court of Al-Mutawakkil al-Abbasi by the name of Sa'id. This man, Al-Mutawakkil told him, why don't you sneak in his house at night when he's asleep and steal something from his home? I want you to go into his home and take whatever you find suspicious. Go. And then we can use this as evidence against him to just have an excuse to kill him and execute him, basically. He really wanted an excuse to really get rid of the Imam. So he sends this man by the name of Sa'id to the house of the Imam in the middle of the night, snuck in, and he's trying to steal. But it's dark. All of a sudden, he hears someone say, Sa'id, where do you think you are going in this dark? Let me give you a candle so you can see your way and be able to see what you want to take. And it's all for you to take. That was Imam al-Hadi telling him and inviting him, look, how are you able to take what you want if you're not able to see? Here, take this candle, use it so you can at least see whatever it is that you want to take. The man's here to rob him, but the Imam ﷺ is so upright and he doesn't care about any of these things. Doesn't care about materialism. Take whatever you want. In addition to that, what did the Imam have? Traditions might indicate he had his sword or a sword. He had the Quran. He had a vase and a carpet, maybe like a prayer mat, perhaps. That's it. So he gave him that candle and he told him, anything you like, please feel free to take. And this would go back, the news would reach Al-Mutawakkil, and he would feel ashamed of his actions. One day Al-Mutawakkil fell very ill, very, very sick. His mom, Al-Mutawakkil, visited Imam Al-Hadi, so the mother of Al-Mutawakkil, and she said to him, I know you're an upright man, and I need you to forgive me over the behavior of my son and what he's doing to you. But he's fallen very ill, and I want you to pray for him. For I know the dua of those who are upright and pious and righteous, such as yourself, is never rejected. She gave him 10,000 dinar. And the Imam said, no worries, I'll pray for him. And he gave her advice as to what Al-Mutawakkil should eat in order to do better and feel better and get better. Later on, Al-Mutawakkil would send people to the house of the Imam just to barge in and harass him and annoy him and should check up on him. And then one day they barged in, the guards of Al-Mutawakkil, and they saw this money and they saw a stamp from the mother of Al-Mutawakkil on a paper, like a contract. And they immediately rushed back to the home, the palace of Al-Mutawakkil al-Abbasi, and said to him, Al-Mutawakkil, we have this, and it's from your mother, and there's 10,000. They called Imam al-Hadi to Al-Mutawakkil al-Abbasi, and he said, demand an explanation. He said, do you remember the other day when you were sick? Your mom came to me and requested a nidhr, requested a vow that if my son gets better, I want my son to be better from you. If so, if that will happen and you can promise it, I will give you $10,000 or 10,000 dinar right now. And that is why you are better at the current moment, because of my dua that I requested for Allah on your sake, on your behalf, that your mother came to me pleading that I do. Mutawakkil felt humiliated and ashamed, and he sent the Imam on his way. One day, Al-Mutawakkil al-Abbasi was drunk, and he held a large gathering, a party, and he demanded that Imam al-Hadi attends. And so he made it clear he wanted the Imam. They sent out to get the Imam, they brought him. When they brought Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, they had him seated near the Caliph, Al-Mutawakkil. When that happened, Al-Mutawakkil was being very aggressive and very foolish. He was under the influence heavily, and he demanded from the Imam in front of all the people who were gathered and partying and drinking. He demanded from him to drink alongside him. Imam al-Hadi said the very lovely line, "Ma khalita lahmi wa dami," that my body and my blood never will mix with such an intoxication. Ma khalita lahmi wa dami. He then requested from the Imam, if you don't drink, then how about you sing for us some lines? Imam said no. He's like, if you're not going to do this, nor will you drink, at least recite some poetry. Imam said something beautiful. He said, I'm not from the poets. I'm not a poet to sing, to recite poetry for you. The Caliph said, La bud, whether you like it or not, you have to recite. Now that was a threat. Now notice how the Imam said, I am not a poet. But then when he is now compelled to recite, look at the magnitude and beauty of the poem that the Imam began to recite. He states, and the meaning is very beautiful for all those who understand the lines. It really truly is bone chilling. And these lines by Imam al-Hadi are powerful, brothers and sisters. I remember listening to people who went through Saddam's horrible regime and went through the jails and cells and torture. And sometimes they would say, we would recite this lovely poem because it really talks about exactly what we're going through. People who are undermined and subjugated to severe treatment and torment. This poem reminds us that that horrible tyrant will one day get justice done, will one day be treated with the way he treated us. What does the Imam say? He says, Batu ala qulalil ajbali tahrusuhum. They spend their nights on the tops of mountains, guarded and shielded and away from all of society. غلب الرجال فلم تنفعهم القلل. Away from everyone, but alas, the mountain tops will never aid them forever. واستنزلوا بعد عز من معاقلهم وأسكنوا حفرا يا بئس ما نزلوا. And they came down from the peaks and went straight to the holes of their graves. And what a difficult grave they will be spending their time in. ناداهم صارخ من بعد دفنهم. And a caller calls to them after they have been buried. أين الأسرة والتيجان والحلل. Where are the crowns? Where are the gems? Where are the luxuries that you had? ناداهم صارخ من بعد دفنهم أين الأسرة والتيجان والحلل. فأفصح القبر عنهم حين سألهم تلك الوجوه عليها الدود يقتتل. And so the grave gave a response on their behalf, for they could no longer speak, these horrible tyrants. Where are the faces that used to be covered and concealed? Where are those faces that no one would see hiding behind curtains? The grave gave a response that these faces, upon them are insects and bugs eating and fighting over their flesh and what they can consume. قد طالما أكلوا دهرا وقد شربوا. And how long did they spend their time and days eating and drinking? وأصبحوا اليوم بعد الأكل قد أكلوا. And now today they became the lunch and food for insects and other creations to eat from and consume from. Al-Mutawakkil, upon hearing this powerful, epic poem of Imam Ali al-Hadi alayhi salam, due to his drunkenness and how drunk he was unaware of his behavior, of his actions. But when the poem was recited, he was in utter shock, such that traditions say he was holding that glass of alcohol of wine, and he spilled it, and it broke, and all of that just went. And the Mutawakkil was in utter shock. He ordered the Imam to go back to where he was. And it came down to the time in which the Mutawakkil al-Abbasi said that I can no longer handle this person. And so they sent for that poison to go and be placed in the food that the Imam had. And the Imam would feel the pain of that poison in his body. And the time came for the Imam to depart this world and return. He was with his son, Imam Hassan al-Askari, the father of our current Imam and our Savior al-Qa'im. And he began to say how I remember and I recall that on a time like this, your grandfather, Abu Abdullah, would lay on that ground and he didn't have his son. Yet look at me and I have my son near me. And he would remember and weep even in his final moments. Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Salamullahi alayh. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآله
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين عزیزوں کا غضب آیا نقی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس عزیزوں کا غضب آیا نقی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس شہنشاہ دو عالم ہو اٹھا جگ سے ہزار افسوس عزیزوں کا غضب آیا نقی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس نبی مرکز میں روتے ہیں علی جنت سے آئے ہیں نبی مرکز میں روتے ہیں علی جنت سے آئے ہیں کھلے سر فاطمہ پوتے کو رونے پہ آئی ہے عزیزوں کا غضب آیا نقی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس عزیزوں کا غضب آیا نقی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس کرو ماتم سبھی مل کے قیامت ہے عزادار کرو ماتم سبھی مل کے قیامت ہے عزادارو دیا ظالم نے زہر ہے شہ کو عزادارو عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نقی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نقی جگ سے اٹھا افسوس یوں رو رو عسکری لاشیں پدر پہ کہتے ہیں ہر بار یوں رو رو عسکری لاشیں پدر پہ کہتے ہیں ہر بار ہوا بن باپ کا افسوس کروں میں کیا دیگر افغان عزیزوں کیا غضب آیا نقی جگ उठा अफसोस अजीजों क्या गजब आया नकी जग से उठा अफसोस الفاتحة اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى 9 المأسومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم